So, hi, I'm sitting here with Lanie, who is a parent of a profoundly deaf child and who I've had the pleasure of working with as a support staff worker. And so, one of our first questions was for her to introduce herself. So,
Oh, okay. Well, I'm Lanie, and I have a daughter who's deaf, profoundly, and she did wear hearing aids at one point when she was little, and then she did have a cochlear implant that was not a successful implant. She did get some sound with it, and she still uses it when she goes to the movies. She uses it still for the music, but she prefers to be deaf. She's much happier being deaf, and it's her body, so I'm like, whatever you want. Yeah, and she's in grade 9.
yeah. So now I'm going to ask you, do you remember your initial reaction, from way back?
Yeah. Well, I do. I was relieved that we finally had a diagnosis because it felt like a battle trying to get her diagnosed as hard of hearing or deaf. Not that I knew that was what was wrong with her. We knew something was off about 2 months old. She didn't startle. I was like, wow, this is the world's best baby. But she cried so loud, and I didn't know. Yeah, so we went to the doctor, and then they passed us on to the pediatrician. And the pediatrician didn't. I don't know if she was new or if we just got a really bad pediatrician. Or if she just was having a really off day, but she started testing massive for chromosome issues and Down syndrome, and I'm glad she ruled out like all sorts of different things, but because of that, it made the diagnosis like almost another 4 months in coming. And then when I said to her, maybe she's not hearing very well, but it wasn't my first thought. Like, I didn't really know I was a new mom. She's my first child. I didn't know what was kind of going on. I just knew something wasn't quite how I've known babies to behave. She was normal, she was fine, she was healthy, she was happy, but I knew something was just a little off, and I was like, something's maybe just a little different. And so I asked for a hearing test, and back then, many years ago, they didn't. She's 14.
14, so even 14 years ago.
14 years ago, they did not have the early childhood hearing program in place yet. That happened 3 years after she was diagnosed.
Oh.
And so they didn't have hearing tests in the hospital. They didn't have screenings in kindergarten. Not quite yet, I don't think, across the board.
Right.
There were still some districts doing it. But for early intervention from 0 to 3, there was nothing unless a pediatrician said, yeah, let's test it. You weren't getting a hearing test.
And here you were asking for one.
Yeah. And the pediatrician was like, and so a couple months later, finally she's like, okay, we'll send you to the health unit and you can get a hearing test screen done. And I still remember who it was, and in Vernon there, and she got her screening test, and he came back, and he was very, I remember him being very like serious and solemn, and like, your daughter has a significant hearing loss, and he goes, my equipment's not able to get how bad it is, but we know it's pretty bad. And he was talking about severe, profound. And he goes, we need to send you to Children's to get an ABR and whatever. And I was like, oh, finally. Like, I knew she had a hearing loss.
Yeah.
And he's kind of like, what?
Yeah.
I was like,
the opposite
let's
reaction.
get on the road with this. Yeah, but it was relief for me because I knew finally exactly what it was that I needed to work with.
Yeah.
And I had already started signing with her because I kind of had a feeling in my gut. And as a parent, trust your gut.
Yeah.
I just feel like if I had had a medical profession, like a doctor, whoever I was talking to, I think at the time it was an audiologist, and an ENT, when we were that initial conversation of, okay, here's your diagnosis. Okay, now what are you going to do? And it was like, whoa, wait, like I'm still trying to totally take this like diagnosis in, and like, so, okay, she doesn't hear. Why? Like, I was kind of curious. Is it genetic? I was just curious. didn't change anything, but I was just kind of curious, like, how did that happen? I was relieved that I finally knew, okay, this is what we have to work with. I'm glad I've already started signing. So we already got that piece. So now what? And so they're handing me pamphlets and like, this is a surgery we can do. This is this, and this. And my first question, I remember clearly, was, so are there any other like deaf people I could talk to about like what, or a parent that has a deaf kid, like what's it like, and sort of maybe what to do, like get an opinion. And then they kind of blew it off and were like, oh well, yeah, there's organizations, and they kind of listed a few, like the Elf Club and the BC Hearing Resource Center and DCS, and oh yeah, there's a deaf school and this and that. They kind of just but okay, there's surgery and there's this, and I get that coming from a medical profession, like they're helpers. They want to help your child be normal. But it's like, well,
yeah, and ties back to,
it ties
you
back.
know,
I don't. It's what's normal. Really?
Yeah.
No one is,
and they're not broken. And
they're not broken.
Yeah.
And I get that the medical community wants to help people be better or fix things because that's their job. But I feel like when it comes to hearing loss and deafness, I don't think it needs to be approached that way. I think it just needs to be approached with, because it's not just a clear, every deaf kid is different, every hard of hearing kid is different. So what works best?
And that's the key thing, isn't it?
What's going to work best in my world? What's going to work best in our community, where you live, your family, how it works. But anyways, yeah, if I had that connection, or a person saying, just take some time, or come see a deaf preschool, or I would have been like, oh, well, this is how this works.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it would have changed anything, but it would have been nice to have had that other opinion. Like, I get all this information, but I wanted the other side of it too. And I
that's
felt that was
one of the
missing.
reasons we wanted to kind of ask parents interviews, because we need to all educate ourselves. And for you at
be
that
the
point,
advocate,
you know, you needed that information.
But it's intimidating because those medical professions, like, they're the professionals. You're just a parent, but actually you're a lot more than that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, trust your gut.
That's right. So now, what would you want a support staff person in the classroom to kind of know? What would you think would be, now you think of your child a little older, and you think,
I would want them to know about the hearing loss, or like the deaf world. I would like them to be educated in that, because they're going to be working with a deaf or hard of hearing student, so they need to know about that world. Also, like, they need to know that they're the one and only sort of advocate, especially for the ones that aren't able to talk yet or sign because they're limited in language. Like, for the little ones, you're their advocate, or you're there to sort of help show them how to advocate. Because a lot of times, like, they kind of get lost in the busyness of school and all that. And also, I would like the staff to know, like, when it comes to your student that you're trained for and you're working with, you're the expert. Like, some teachers, that's their very first experience with a deaf kid or a hard of hearing child. They've never had one maybe in their classroom. They have no idea. They're not an expert either. They're a teacher. And so, you know, don't stay silent. This is for the support staff.
Yeah, and because
don't
you
stay
have
silent.
that multi-role, is that you've been the parent.
I've been the support staff. I've been the parent. I've been both. I've been both, actually.
Yeah, and you continue to be. But
like, don't stay silent. Like, if you feel like, well, actually, if you stand in front of the window when you're telling them all their instructions, you know, my hard of hearing student or my deaf child is going to really have a hard time looking at your face and seeing your expressions because you're in front of a window and the light's coming this way. You know, like, could you maybe turn to the wall, or, you know, like, just little things that, like, be the advocate. Like, speak up if you see, I mean, probably don't interrupt the teacher talking, but, like, those are the kind of things to like touch base with the teacher. Hey, you know what? I think we should sit our student like here because it's the quietest part of the classroom and their hearing aid is going to pick up like all the little tiny sounds and I don't know, just be their voice.
Yeah. So the supports you think that are critical for the child to be successful. I guess that's the advocacy piece. That's right. Oh yeah, that's what we were just talking about.
Yeah, the supports for them to be successful. I think it changes. Like there's the elementary piece, like the K to 7-ish, K to 5, whatever. The younger ones, they need that language base. You need a good language foundation. So whether it's speech therapy and learning language and how to listen for those sounds, or whether it's the signing part of it and you need that language, an acquisition of language and learning all of that and how to, like Madison in kindergarten, she pretty much just sat on her hands the whole time and just watched because she was too shy to sign because she was the only one signing. And she didn't want to be different. And so building that sort of self-confidence in a child that it's not that you're different, you talk this way and they talk that way, and like teaching kids that that's okay, and so then once she kind of got that, well then, good luck getting her to be quiet.
It keeps
that
coming
piece
back
is like
to that.
that base, like the academics, the language, in the elementary. But now that she's in high school, I feel like that focus on those supports are a little lessened because now she's older. Her language is great. She doesn't need any help with that. She still needs some academic, like with reading, because English is her second language. It's not her first language. ASL and English, it is not interchangeable. It's not English that's in sign. It's two completely different languages. So when she's signing to me about how she wants to write a paragraph, sometimes I'm like, okay, well, you sign, I'll write what English would say, and then you tell me if that's what you want to say, It's tough, that piece, that she still needs that little English sort of writing and reading support. So high school's a bit different. And then also I would say support in the social piece of high school, the older kids. High school is all social for them. Like that is their life.
Yeah.
That's like air to them. Oxygen is their friends. So connecting them to someone that they can connect to, peers like them, not feeling like an island and isolated, and their only person that they know is deaf is them. Like having those little connections. Whereas Madison this year she's now sort of, so she's kind of had it all. Was mainstream from K to grade 3, 4. And then she went to the deaf school 5 and still is in the deaf school. So 5, 6, and 7, she was in the elementary school, and she had an awesome teacher that first year that knew that all she needed to do was just talk and connect with kids just like her, because she felt so isolated in the mainstream. And then she got that out of her, and then now it was like academics and moving on. And now Madison's sort of moving away from the deaf peers a little bit this year and kind of going back to the hearing world, because she has that confidence in her, and she's making hearing friends in the high school now, and she's really, she's made some really close friends, and really is advocating for herself really well. I talked on the phone with the academic counselor for her courses, because they just finished picking them already for next year. I know, it's like we're in like March, not even March, and they're picking courses for next year. And the counselor, first thing she said was, I don't know if we really need to have this conversation, because she pretty much advocated for herself on everything she wanted. She was very clear. So I was like, well, I've done my job.
Yeah. Oh.
She knows what she wants.
Excellent.
And she was like, I want some more mainstream hearing classes, because she wants to challenge herself. She knows that it's a hearing world. She's going to be in a job, most likely the only deaf person, adult in that workplace. And she wants to kind of know what that's like a little bit more.
Yeah.
So she's pushing herself.
That's right. And then getting a well-rounded.
But having that support piece where if she needs a deaf friend to go and have a sleepover with and chat and, you know, make fun of hearings, then she's got that too.
Yeah.
So I feel like this critical is having a well-rounded support system for your child. And however that looks,
Yeah.
it's going to be different.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you what Madison's was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this was great, though. But
Okay.
I think it's good, and it's all good information, and and advocacy keeps coming back, doesn't it? Like we need to,
Yes.
so they
be
become
the voice and show them how to
Yes,
advocate.
yes.
Like was her voice for so many years,
Mm-hmm.
and still sometimes I have to, you know, there's the odd
You're
phone
still the
call
mom.
to the principal, and hey, just to remind you,
Yeah.
but be their voice, but then show them how to be their own voice, because especially in the busyness of a classroom, with you don't just have one student that needs extra support or that extra attention. You've got a list like that. And if you're not the advocate, chances are the squeakiest wheel is going to get that attention, and if you're not advocating, they're not going to be getting the services they need. So, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, thank you
okay.
so much
You're
for
welcome.
your time.
No problem.